Hello and welcome to another car fix video from Car Fix, where I do what I love and I love what I do. In today's video I'm going to be replacing an alternator on a 2012 Buick Enclave. Now, as you can see from the picture, I do not have a lot of room to work with, so this job is going to be a bit of a challenge. Now, the location of the alternator on this vehicle is the top left corner of the engine, so if I'm facing the vehicle, the alternator will be on my left hand side. Now, the R&R procedure for this alternator is to remove the fuse box, the engine strut, and the engine strut bracket. Now, the engine strut bracket is below the upper radiator hose, so I'm going to have to mess around with the coolant system. But in this video, I'm going to replace the alternator without removing the fuse box or even touching the coolant system. Alright, the first step is to locate and disconnect the negative battery cable. The battery location on this vehicle is behind the right front passenger seat in the floorboard. Now, in order to remove the battery cover completely out, the plastic trim for the rear seat sliding rails has to be removed. And also, the size of the hold-down screw for the battery cover is a T20 Torx bit. Now, after removing the battery cover out of the way, I only disconnect the negative battery cable. Not the positive and the negative, just the negative battery cable. Now, disconnecting the negative battery cable sounds like an easy job, and it should be an easy job, but sometimes the cable might be stuck on the battery post. Now, when removing the battery cable, disconnecting the negative battery cable, the nut for the cable clamp should not be removed all the way out. Now, if the battery cable is stuck on the battery post, I do not recommend any hammering or any prying on the cable, because this will damage the battery post. Just a little wiggle action back and forth, and the cable should break free from the battery post. Now, anytime I disconnect the negative battery cable, I always put a cover on top of the battery post, just in case if the cable decides to spring back and will not make contact with the negative battery post. Alright, next I have to remove the drive belt for the alternator. Now, to gain access to the drive belt, it's either I have to remove the right front wheel or turn the steering wheel all the way to the right. Also I have to remove some plastic clips for the wheel well cover to gain access to to expose the drive belt. Now, it's always a good idea to draw a belt routing diagram, so this way I'll have something to go by when I install the belt back on the engine. This engine has an automatic belt tensioner, so a special tool is needed to take the tension off of the belt to remove it. Alright, the next step is to remove the lower mounting bolt for the alternator. Now, the lower mounting bolt for the alternator is also the mounting bolt for the lower idler pulley. This bolt is about 6 to 7 inches long, so there's no way I can take it all the way out. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to break it loose and thread it all the way out and just leave it there. Now, the fun begins when I move to the top of the engine. Now, in order to gain access to the alternator electrical connector and the positive battery cable that comes from the fuse box all the way down to the alternator, I have to remove the coolant system recovery tank and also the bracket that holds the air conditioning high side line to the front clip. Now, I know I said I'm not going to touch the coolant system, but this is the recovery tank for the coolant system, so the main system is still intact. It's not open, so I do not have to bleed it. There's also a plastic connector that holds a wiring harness to the back of the recovery tank. The charging system on this vehicle is controlled by the ECM and the BCM, engine control module and body control module. Now, there's an electrical connector that feeds directly to the ECM that plugs into the alternator that needs to be unplugged. And also there is a positive battery cable that runs from the underhood fuse box all the way down to the alternator. That cable has a rubber protective boot on it to protect the cable from its surrounding, because it's positive and everything around it is negative. That boot has to be moved to the side in order to gain access to the 13mm nut, hold down nut for the cable. Now, as you can see, I do not have a lot of room, so I'm going to use a small ratchet. That's a 1/4 inch ratchet with a 13mm deep well socket. Alright, now the next step is to remove whatever is holding the alternator to the cylinder head. Now, you might think that the alternator is held on the cylinder head with 2 upper mounting bolts, but it's not. actually has two upper mounted nuts. Those 50 millimeter nuts have 4 to 5 inch long studs behind them. Both of those studs have to be removed in order to remove the alternator completely out of the vehicle. Now, to remove the studs, I'm going to use a 9/32 1/4 inch socket to unbolt from the cylinder head. Also, I think they use studs instead of bolts because both of the studs have two brackets on them. And now, if you're facing the vehicle, the one on the left has a bracket for the power steering return line, and the one on the right is the bracket for the air conditioning low pressure line. Now, after removing the studs, the alternator is free from the engine. Remember that lower mounting bolt with the idler pulley attached to it. That bolt has to be removed. Now, in order to remove that bolt, I'm going to have to twist the alternator so the alternator pulley is facing upward, and that is the only way that bolt can be removed. Now, after removing the lower mounting bolt for the alternator is ready to come out of the vehicle. But as you can see from the video, it's impossible to remove it from the bottom or the top of the engine. So basically, the alternator is stuck in the engine bay. Now, removing the alternator out of the engine bay is one of the easiest part of this job. Now, all I have to do is go back to the bottom of the vehicle, remove the front part of the wheel well cover, and once I do that, I can see there's a big opening there, and there's the alternator sitting right on top of the frame. Now, all I have to do is just reach in and grab it and pull it down. Now, it's a good idea not to stand directly under the alternator because it's really heavy, and I recommend using both hands to pull it down because if it falls on my head, if I'm standing directly under the alternator and it falls on my head, I'm going to have a really bad headache. Now, as you can see, I'm holding the flashlight and the camera, so one hand is not going to do it for me. I'm going to have to switch to two hands mode. It's easier and safer that way. Now that I have the old alternator out of the vehicle, I'm going to show you what it looks like when it's mounted on the engine. Now this is the old alternator, and the alternator has two upper studs that both of them bolts to the cylinder head, and those studs have two 15 millimeter nuts that holds the alternator and the two brackets to the cylinder head. And this is the lower mounting bolt with the idler pulley attached to it. Now, before I install the new alternator, I need to check a few things. I have to match my new parts with my old one. Also, I have to check the one-way clutch on the new alternator pulley. Now, if I spin the alternator pulley, it should catch in one direction and it should be free in the other direction. Also, I need to check the new alternator for any noises like chirping, clicking, grinding, or any drag in the bearing itself. If that's the case, that means that the new alternator is defective and I need to get another one, and it cannot be installed that way. The installation procedures for the alternator are the same as the removal procedures, but in reverse. Now, if you own a Chevy Traverse or GMC Acadia or Saturn Outlook, this video actually applies to all these vehicles because they all have the same engine, and you know, the location of the alternator is the same and the battery location is the same. The only difference about them is the make and the model, and also the body shape or the body style. But you can use this video to actually remove and replace an alternator on those vehicles. Now, please watch the video until the end because the installation video is going to be in a high speed. Before I end this video, I would like to thank you for taking the time to watch it, and do not hesitate to share it and like it and subscribe to my channel. And also please activate the notification bell, so every time I upload a new video you'll be notified. And also please check out my other videos, code P0161 on a 2005 Chevy Suburban and code P3400 on a 2008 Honda Accord. From now until the next video from the Car Fix channel, thanks for watching and drive safe.